Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of an ongoing series where we basically take the camera anywhere we want to try to find secrets and new discoveries to some of our favorite games. And today, we're going to be talking about Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door again in celebration of the remake that just came out on the Nintendo Switch. Oh, also, the animated intro was made by Daniel Flynn. Make sure you check out his Twitter account in the video description down below so that you can either hire him or just check out the stuff that he's doing. Anyways, let's revisit this title and see what we were able to find. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, of course, had to incorporate the greatest thing about this game, which is having hundreds of the same characters on screen at once. It's amazing looking, I love it. But what happens in this particular scene is really fascinating. So all these dry bones that end up leaving after you defeat them scurry off camera, and when you pan the camera out of bounds, it becomes a work of art, honestly. All the dry bones run off into a circle, like a ring-like pattern, and the other ones just sort of scatter off into another pattern, creating this tapestry of art that you would never be able to see out of bounds. A similar thing that happens with the boos is when you release them from the chest and they all fly off to the right, you can see that they all sort of wall into one particular spot. But they only stay there long enough for the cutscene to end, so that way if you walked over to your right slightly, you wouldn't see this. Now I want to show you the battle stage from a different angle. I know that the game itself kind of moves the camera around in different angles so that you can sort of get a quick glimpse of some of these things, like for example, the boombox that's over in the corner here, as well as an electrical panel and stuff like that. Many things, which again is not technically a boundary break if you can see it even for a glimpse. But the one thing I did want to do is take the camera right up to these boxes here because they have Japanese lettering on them. And so I went ahead and asked my audience on Twitter what the heck was going on here. Does it say anything in specific? And the best response I got was from Repuken, who says it looks like Noko Noko transport or freight. Now Noko Noko is what they call the Koopas in Japan, so it's basically like a Koopa freight company. And that's the assumption that the image on the far right is a Koopa shell that's being launched to the side. And then we want to look inside of Mario and Luigi's house. Now, look, there's a lot of things that are in the room that you normally get to see. So I'm just taking the camera up to all the areas that are normally in the background, like the toothbrushes, as well as the cups, and the stove with the wood logs and all that. But what's really cool about this house is that there's another room to it that never gets shown to the player. Mario comes out of the room, but there's a lot going on inside this room that you never get to see. They got colored bunk beds, one for Luigi and Mario, obviously, green and red. Some plates, a mirror, a dresser that also is green and red. Some empty bottles. I don't know what's going on with that, but I'm not here to judge. The most interesting thing of all is that there's a portrait in this room, and it features Mario, Luigi, and Princess, with Mario and Luigi not having their signature mustaches, and overall the drawing looks like it was made in like probably 20 seconds or less by an artist. It's really cool unused content. And then over here we have this low poly version of Rogueport. This is really cool. So if we move the camera past the letter and everything, we can get a better look at all this stuff that is supposed to be really far away. And everything you're supposed to see at Rogueport is pretty much accounted for here. The one thing that's really special about this model that you would never be able to see from the distance that you look at it from is that these boxes over here share the same texture sheet as the buildings themselves. So when you look at it close up, you can see the textures for the buildings on top of the boxes. Then over in this house in Petalburg, we have a Koopa that is a little too obsessed with Princess Peach, and if you find yourself offended by that statement, you should probably reassess yourself a bit. This segment is not about giving you guys some life advice here, though. What I wanted to show you is that on the back of these portraits, they can show you duplicate or more images of Princess Peach. All these are already shown in the house itself, but one of these images gets cut off, and you don't get to see the full image, and with this camera, you can see the pose that Princess Peach is supposed to have, which seems to have her arm sticking out a little bit as if she's dancing. And while we're still on the topic of weird things with textures, I noticed that this computer over here in Glitzville uses the same textures as the door to the locker room. In fact, I can take the camera right over to that door and show you a direct comparison. And this one's a Boundary Break classic. If I was to ever tell you what was the one thing I remember about the 1,000-Year Door episode that I made 1,000 years ago, it would be this texture that I found inside of this lamp. It looks like a light bulb or an eyeball. To me, it looks very much like an eyeball. But here's the thing, even on my second go around, I was looking specifically for this texture being used somewhere else in this room, and I could not for the life of me find it anywhere. My audience at the time was telling me, hey, look at the lights that are on the wall itself. I'm pretty sure that's the texture, but I'm looking at it and I don't see the resemblance. And then here's one of my favorite uses of forced perspective. So here's a scene where Bowser gets into the clown copter and then breaks through his own castle. And you get to see this little graphic here showing him leaving the castle. Now, how does that look when the camera is tilted in a different direction? Well, it shows you that this scene has layers. There's a ripped wall with 3D depth, and then behind that is a background that is flat, which is really freaking funny because if you take the camera outside the boundaries, that same flat texture is used for the background that remains unseen. So here's a weird image of Bowser, and at the time I thought, wow, this looks like Bowser with a freaking mustache. And I guess the art team for the remake felt the same way because, yeah, in the remake, it's clearly definably Bowser with a mustache for some reason. Also, here's some more fun with forced perspective. The title screen itself is just a giant image, and you can move it around in a 3D space and look at it from behind. Also, the outside of Mario's house is only used for a really short amount of time. But if you were to take the camera inside of Mario's house, you could see that Mario is stored in here despite the fact that he's not in this scene whatsoever. And then here was something that I was really shocked by. We'll show you that the pages on the left are a 3D model, and the image that was originally on the right gets generated and put into the 3D model to be flipped. And that's all happening while the new image on the flat texture gets replaced itself. It just seems so complicated for a book. I feel like there's gotta be an easier way to do this. Also, I feel like this is a great time to let you guys know that things get stored well underneath the boundaries. And for example here, we have Mario that is always in the void well below this book at any given time that you boot up Mario and the 1,000-Year Door on GameCube. And this goes for any character that will ever be used in any of these maps. So for the docking area of Rogueport, you can see a whole mess of characters that would eventually show up on this screen. And they all get stored in the same exact position, so they're all clipping into each other, making a giant mess. This includes the terrifying fish that chomps at Paper Mario if he was to ever go into any body of water. I just want to say, by the way, I absolutely hate that. Like, you could be in Petalburg, for example, and it still feels like the water is just absolutely hostile. It's too much. But what I wanted to show you is that if you pan the camera way, way out when Mario goes into the water, for whatever reason, for a very, very brief moment, you can see Mario's arms stored way outside the boundaries. Why this happens, I couldn't even begin to tell you. I'll let the comment section speculate, but for me, I couldn't even try to speculate on this one. And now let's talk about Hooktail's shadow. In this one little scene here, you can see Hooktail go into the castle as well as the shadow, which means that, of course, by the logic that I've been telling you earlier, if you look underneath the boundaries, you can see both Hooktail's shadow stored as well as Hooktail herself. These two entities are separate from one another, though. If you were to take the camera above the shadow when the cutscene happens, you will not find Hooktail. Also, underneath this scene here, you can find a lone toad, which I was very surprised to see. But more important than that, there's an unused couch in Twilight Town. Inside this house here, if you take the camera down below, you can see a couch that never gets used. With all that said, let's do a zoom out of Hooktail's castle and show you that there's way more to this area than you probably would have imagined. And now for your disgust and morbid curiosity, here is Mario without his mustache. I made sure to capture a scene where his mouth actually opens so you can see where his mouth starts and ends. And now we're going to be talking about layers. So unsurprisingly, the characters in Paper Mario all have different layers to their character models. And because of that, you can see details to some of these characters that you wouldn't be able to see. For example, this armored Koopa that's from Bowser's army, believe it or not, this is something that's very rare in Paper Mario and the 1,000-Year Door. Taking the camera inside of his helmet will show you the rest of his Koopa face. Now he's missing his Koopa beak, but that's only because his Koopa beak was supposed to be his armor. But otherwise, you get an idea of what his face would look like without his helmet. And then the same thing goes for Kroop. So if you take the camera behind his face, you can see that he has a Koopa face. Although he's missing eyes with this one, which that makes sense. Another interesting thing is that his Koopa shell has a hole in it, that of course you would never be able to see. And of course I also had to show you Zip Toad's eyes, and the funniest thing about Zip Toad's face is that in order to see his entire face with the eyes, yeah, I had to get a really funny camera angle with the field of view, so enjoy that. And then when Lord Crump is in his mech, there's something really weird inside. There seems to be some sort of dev square stored inside. It could just be something left over, but in most cases, something like this is supposed to have a dev function attached to it. And also, you can see the lever that he operates that you normally can't see. And you might be surprised to see how many layers Bowser has when he's in the clown copter. We're just gonna move the camera over here so you can see each individual layer, but on top of that, I went ahead and did the field of view thing with his face as well, so that you can see this beauty. Oh man, from this angle he actually looks kinda cute. And going back to Lord Crump, here's a deconstruction of his layers. There's just some things that are a little bit surprising, like the body being a full circle. And here's Princess Peach from behind. Now, what do you think would happen if we turned the camera around here? Some people might think like, oh, she's gotta have her face on the other side. And other people are gonna be like, it's just gonna be a head of hair. You would both be wrong in this case, as the person who made this version of Princess Peach added, I don't know what you call it, like a super long neck or like a very strange face texture that's on the other side. Obviously it has no eyes, but what I think it's made for is the slightest possibility that the hair would sway enough where you would see Princess Peach's neck, which I don't think ever happens. And then this creature I was really surprised by. So you look at him and you think to yourself, oh sure, it's just a white t-shirt and a yellow collar. But taking the camera behind him will reveal that no, it wasn't a white t-shirt, it was actually a white belly this whole time, and that the rest of his fur is on his body, and that yellow collar seems to be more like a gold necklace. Then here's a character that looks hilarious from the side, because you can really see the 3D depth of the several circles that makes up this character. And then the face for the cursed box, I was really surprised by this. The face is its own separate character, and then the purple is just a square backdrop that doesn't really go for very long. It only covers just enough to cover a 16:9 widescreen format. But outside of that, it's pretty much void outside of it. And here's a funny thing. Here's Hooktail in the battle screen. And if you look at Hooktail out of bounds, you can see that she is definitely poking out of the entire level. Super funny stuff. Also, we can see what happens when Hooktail goes out of bounds and then goes into the crowd. It's just a warp. I'm really surprised though. I thought the character for sure would actually move into place. But nope, Hooktail just sort of warps into place, and not only that, but her legs dig into the geometry. No longer is her feet placed in the same way as it was when she's on the stage. And then of course there's the Princess Peach shower scene, which that sounds so weird coming out of my mouth now that I think about it. But anyways, taking the camera past the shower curtain will show you that she's fully clothed in the bathtub, of course. And you can see the exact moment that her character changes from the long hair to the shorter put up hair. Similarly, she changes into a new outfit for a different part of the game, and you can see here once again, she's just in there the entire time until suddenly she's just a completely different character. And now let's look at the two bugs in the game. We got the flies over here. Taking the camera close up to the flies will show you that they have red eyes. And that actually matches up with the cockroaches as well, although the cockroaches have a little bit of 3D geometry going on, with a bend down the center to give themselves a body. Keep an eye out for how the roaches look in the remake, because it's completely different. Then we got Miss Mouse over here. Just wanted to show you where she goes when she jumps out the window. She just kind of hangs out in the void. Or I guess it's not really the void yet. She's still within the sky dome. But needless to say, she's floating in the air and she hangs out there pretty much the entire time. Also wanted to show you a close-up of Goombella's book here. The inside pages do have an image that would be really hard to see in the original game. But if you take it really close up, you can see the outline of a Goomba. And then at this part of the game, there is a reference to the Famicom disk system, which is really surprising. But they don't make this subtle at all. There's a whole sequence that involves basically the opening of the Famicom disk system. But the model for the Famicom disk system is really interesting as well. The bottoms and sides, basically every side you can't see the Famicom disk system, also has that disk part of the texture sheet displayed on all those other sides. Then I wanted to show you what it looks like when Mario goes into the Twilight Town pipe and gets rejected from it. He actually never stops spinning, and he gets all the way to the bottom here and is just sort of spinning without any sort of warping to the character model itself. He's just flat as he's supposed to be when he's out of the pipe. And then I wanted to show you what it looks like when Vivian grabs Mario and pulls him into the ground. The fact of the matter is that the two characters are there, they're just scrunched up so tightly that you can barely recognize them anymore. However, it's Vivian that's on top and Mario that's on the bottom. I was able to tell by the colors mostly. You can see the same thing happen with one of the sisters, but of course, because it's a cutscene, the character model disappears very quickly after that. And then there's the computer screens that are used throughout the game. Obviously, just putting it into widescreen can tell you everything you want to know about this. It's just a texture that is thrown in front of the player to give the illusion that it's being viewed from a computer screen. And in this title splash screen here at the very beginning of the game, you can see that the stars are stored underneath the scene, as well as a very green void. In fact, I could chroma key this and put whatever I want in here. I don't care. But yeah, those stars belong to a later scene in the game where it does go from day to night, and you can see that happening here with this scene. And also, I want to show you what happens to this boat when it leaves off screen. It actually just gets culled out at a certain point, but you can still see that the model exists there because there are two little tiny waves that don't get culled out, and it shows you what it's doing too. At a certain point, the boat does just flip back based off of where the waves are. And then I want to show you something interesting about the pause menu. Some of the elements for the pause menu are stored way out of bounds, and they don't get called out either. So like this blue box right here is stored all the way down to the left. And what the heck is that used for? Well, it took me a while to figure it out, but what it is that if you press Z here with the sort methods, it's a sort method graphic or whatever. And you can see that it's being used here to house the organizational selections. And lastly, I just wanted to show you this train background from another angle and say that's it. That's all I got for now. If I'm gonna push one thing for you guys to check out, I finally made my video feature over my third channel. This is not new, so it's not like a quick, easy type video. We put a lot of editing into this one, and it's about discussing Nintendo and speculating on why they choose not to work on documentaries. It also goes over what I think is really important about making sure that they do make documentaries at some point. Me and Bloops the editor are really proud of this one, so if you guys could check that out, it would mean the world to me. I swear I won't be advertising the third channel that much over on here. So for me to tell you to go check out this particular video means that there is something special about it in my mind. So thank you so much for just at least hearing the spiel. Thank you so much for watching this video. And if you're new here, of course, hit subscribe. And to the rest of you, thanks again. Take care.